Welcome to Goal to Goal, the spectacle of the sport, fans, stadiums and riots. This time we take a tour of the greatest soccer cauldrons of the world, from architectural wonders and monster structures to the historical arenas that have played host to some of the most classic clashes in the history of the sport. We'll also be turning the spotlight on the fans, whose passion for football can sometimes tip over into violence. That's all coming up on Goal to Goal. Stadiums. It's easy to overlook the importance of the stages on which the world game is played out on a weekly basis. These giant structures of steel and stone are often taken for granted by the thousands of spectators, players and officials who frequent them. But over the past 100 years, they've played an integral part in the growth of soccer around the globe. These stadiums have come to mean so much more than a place to watch football. For millions of club supporters around the world, local grounds have become spiritual homes. They provide an altar at which devoted fans can worship their anointed team and cheer them on in their noble crusade for sporting supremacy. They are the origin of thousands of memories, the unbelievable wins, the unforgettable defeats, and the insufferable ties. They provide a sanctuary where the worries of the outside world are replaced by rumours of injury and fears of relegation. In this gated community, discrimination is based on the colour of your shirt. In these hallowed halls, villains are made, legends are born, and dreams become reality. Wembley Stadium is the most recognised football stadium in England, if not the world. Located in the London borough of Brent, Wembley is the home of the English national team and the major English domestic finals, making it the #1 destination for any aspiring footballer. Although the original stadium was demolished to make way for a new one in 2003, Wembley Stadium is still steeped in history. Built by Sir Robert McAlpine in 1923 and first known as the British Empire Exhibition Stadium, or Empire Stadium for short, the building cost an enormous £750,000. The feat of erecting the enormous structure was completed in just 300 days, and the Empire Stadium's distinctive twin towers quickly became its trademark. In no time at all, games played there became known as appearances under the twin towers. Just as famous were the 39 steps which had to be climbed to reach the royal box, where all the trophies and medals were collected from members of the British royal family. It's also interesting to note that Wembley was the first pitch to be referred to as hallowed turf, a phrase that's since been appropriated by countless stadiums around the world. Upon its completion, the Empire Stadium was crowned the greatest sporting arena in the world. First event, the 1923 FA Cup Final, remains one of the most famous events in sporting history, as much for the circumstances surrounding it as for the game played out on the pitch. In the lead up to the final, the FA grossly underestimated the number of fans who would attend the game. They made the decision not to limit admission by issuing tickets, and it turned out to be a huge mistake. Despite the Empire Stadium's massive capacity, there clearly wasn't enough room in the terraces, as fans spilled onto the pitch and an estimated 60,000 were left stranded outside the stadium. Officials were doubtful the game would even get to kick-off due to the volume of spectators that had spilled onto the pitch. Luckily for both the players and fans, the mounted police were on hand to save the day. The heroes of the piece were Police Constable George Scory and his white horse Billy. Braving the scenes of chaos, Billy slowly but surely pushed the masses back to the side of the field, and the FA Cup final ended up going ahead just 45 minutes late. Other great games at Wembley have included the Matthews Final, where in the 1953 FA Cup final, legendary winger Sir Stanley Matthews helped lead his Blackpool side to a memorable victory over Bolton. That game became even more famous for yielding the only FA Cup final hat-trick to be scored at the original Wembley. Blackpool's Stan Mortensen holds the record for scoring 3 times in the 4-3 victory. What was so inspiring about the Matthews final was the way in which Sir Stanley helped his team overcome a 3-1 deficit with less than half the match left to play. However, Wembley is most famous for hosting a victory that still resonates in England's popular culture: the 1966 World Cup final against West Germany. In a nail-biting affair, the home side thrilled the fans by eventually winning the World Cup 4-2 in extra time. That victory marked the first and last time the country's team has triumphed in the World Cup. The great stadium has also hosted numerous other world-class sporting events. In 1948, Wembley was home to the Summer Olympics. It also played host to Gaelic football, rugby union, American football, greyhound racing, speedway, and even the World Wrestling Federation, which drew a sellout crowd of 80,355 people in 1992. With history pouring out of every tunnel, it's no wonder that one of the greatest players ever to grace a soccer pitch is in awe of the Twin Towers. Football immortal Pelé has been quoted as saying that Wembley is the church of football. It is the capital of football and it is the heart of football. But after so many changes, can it remain the heart of the game? In the lead up to its demolition in 2003, many football fans came out in protest, desperate to cling on to the old Wembley Stadium. Comparing Wembley's place in soccer history to that of other London sporting icons, many believed it was to soccer what Wimbledon was to tennis and Lord's was to cricket. Others believed that destroying this once proud stadium would amount to an obliteration of this sacred ground and all the sanctity within it. Despite the fans' best efforts, the march of progress could not be stopped. The job of demolishing a stadium and tearing down the famous Twin Towers fell to an aptly named giant excavating drill called Goliath. However, the Mammoth Stadium had not been without its detractors. Over the course of its 80-year history, Wembley had developed a reputation for cramped seating, poor facilities and poor transport links. The need to revamp, redevelop or rebuild Wembley was a must for the fans.
Well, it means that football and the millions of people who follow football will have a new national football stadium at Wembley with all the sense of history, nostalgia and tradition that means. They'll have the tradition of a stadium at Wembley, but will be a modern, state-of-the-art stadium with better transport links. So it will be a much better deal for fans.
Having made the decision to rebuild, Football Association Chief Executive Officer Adam Crozier was a fervent evangelist when it came to promoting the new Wembley.
First of all, the amended Foster design, the most important thing to note from our point of view is that nothing has been changed that would affect the fans' enjoyment of watching a football match. It will still have unrivaled space, views and facilities for all of the fans. What has changed in the stadium is that there will be no hotel, no offices and no visitor attractions. The stadium itself is absolutely athletics compliant.
Architectural genius and facility improvements aside, the question remains, will the 21st century Wembley Stadium still have the same feel, the same pride? Will it remain the home of English football? England football legend Bobby Charlton believes that it will.
This is the cradle of football here, Wembley. And whether it's a new stadium or an old stadium, it's in the same spot. The memories will still be here.
Former England coach Sven-Göran Eriksson agrees with Bobby.
It's a dream for any football player to play Wembley Stadium. And not only in England, I guess. It's the most famous stadium in all the world. And you know about it in Sweden, you know about it in every country you come to. This will be a real football ground, and I think England will be very, very proud of it when it's ready.
The question of when the new ground would be ready became a source of great concern, not only for English soccer, but also for the stadium's builder Multiplex. Originally due to be completed by January the 31st, 2006, the repeated delays included such setbacks as a 50-ton steel roof girder slipping out of place. The FA was forced to abandon the stadium's fanfare opening and move that year's FA Cup final back to its temporary home of Cardiff. Dogged by increasing problems and delays that only added to the construction's soaring costs, Multiplex finally had to down tools and stop any further works until revised costs for the stadium were agreed to. Rumours abounded that the budget blowout had increased costs by £35 million, taking the new total price tag for the stadium to an astronomical £800 million. This earned it the dubious honour of becoming easily the most expensive sporting venue in the world. Finally, after many delays, disputes and problems, the new home of English soccer was completed in March 2007, ridiculously over budget and more than 14 months late. The first official game was played on March the 24th, 2007, just 2 weeks after the keys were handed over to the Football Association. On that day, 55,700 curious fans turned out to watch England's under-21 side tie 3-3 with Italy. Aesthetic and facility front, there's no doubt that she's impressive. The new structure is straddled by a 7-metre thick arch, rising 133 metres into the air, nearly triple the height of the old Twin Towers. However, the new arch doesn't quite possess the symbolism of the towers, whose flagpoles were capped with concrete crowns, as a reminder of Wembley's original name, the Empire Stadium. The all-seater stadium is based on a bowl design with a capacity of 90,000, making it the second largest football arena in Europe. It boasts the largest amount of undercover seating in any stadium around the globe. The new 6,350-ton roof covers an area of over 45,000 square metres, over 1/3 of which is movable and can rise to 52 metres above the pitch. With a span of 317 metres, the arch is the longest single-span roof structure in the world and is 134 metres above the level of the external concourse. Despite its massive size, the arch has been cleverly designed to ensure that, no matter what time of the day it is, no shadow will ever be cast onto the pitch. The spectators' area is separated into 3 tiers of seating, with the lower tier holding 34,000 spectators, the middle one 17,000 and the upper one 40,000. Those who use the bathroom regularly will be pleased to note that the stadium prides itself on offering customers a choice of 2,618 toilet facilities, more than any other venue in the world. At full capacity, this works out at 1 toilet for every 34 fans. The stadium has a circumference of 1 kilometre, and there are 56 kilometres of heavy-duty power cable buried in the walls and floors of the arena. 90,000 cubic metres of concrete and a total of 23,000 tonnes of steel were used in the construction of the new stadium. Of course, no matter how well designed the stadium is, it will continue to be surrounded by controversy. The new pitch, which is 4 metres lower than the previous playing field, has come under regular scrutiny since its opening. Many critics have panned the pitch, calling it a pale imitation of the old one. Such criticism gathered momentum when the pitch was found to be in terrible shape after a game between England and Croatia in 2007. Although both sides played on the same surface, the pitch became something of a scapegoat for England's failure to qualify for the UEFA Euro 2008. Despite the understandable teething problems, only time will tell whether the new, improved Wembley will be able to live up to the history-making tradition of its predecessor. No doubt, England fans are hoping that the new turf will live up to its hallowed history by playing host to another World Cup triumph. Coming up, the most famous club ground in Britain. Old Trafford, also known as the Theatre of Dreams, is an all-seater stadium in the Trafford Borough of Greater Manchester in England. Designed by architect Archibald Leach and built for around £90,000 in 1909, the Red Devils have called Old Trafford home for nearly a century. They've played nearly all their home games in this stadium since it officially opened its doors for a game on February the 19th, 1910, where Man U lost to their big rivals Liverpool 4-3. During the Second World War, in March 1941, a German bomb left much of the stadium destroyed, practically wiping out the ground's main terrace. With the stands too dangerous to repair and the cratered pitch covered in debris, Manchester United were forced to share the main road home ground of crosstown rivals Manchester City. It took 8 years to rebuild Old Trafford from scratch, and the new ground lacked many of its earlier creature comforts. The wind and rain failed to deter the fans. The first game at the reopened ground attracted almost 42,000 fans, and their loyalty didn't go unrewarded. Manchester United ended up trouncing visitors Bolton Wanderers 3-0. Over the next 10 years, Old Trafford saw massive developments, with the main stand roof restored in 1954. The addition of a roof over the Stretford end in 1959 saw the ground fully covered. Floodlights were installed to make way for night matches. The old roof pillars were replaced in 1965 with modern-style cantilevering on top of the roof, allowing every spectator to enjoy a completely unobstructed view. The new north and east stands were rearranged to have terracing at the front and a larger seated area towards the back. Emerging as a leader in marketing strategies, Manchester United were quick to exploit the potential benefits of attracting major corporate support by installing the first private boxes at a British football ground. These developments were the first steps in making Old Trafford the amphitheatre it is today. Although it took another few decades to carry out the plan to have all stands converted to cantilevers, the new covered stands made a considerable difference to the atmosphere of the stadium. By trapping the crowd's cheering within the ground and directing it all towards the pitch, players could feel the full force of a capacity crowd, making an away game in the Theatre of Dreams that little bit more daunting for visiting teams. With consistent building works taking place at Old Trafford since the rebuild in 1949, the ground's capacity has fluctuated dramatically over the last 60 years. The initial crowd capacity of 80,000 shrank sharply throughout the 1960s, 70s and 80s, when the stands could hold a mere 60,000 fans. Once the Old Trafford design master plan of the 1960s was completed and the stadium had become a perfect bowl, the capacity dropped even further to a measly 44,000. This became a huge problem for the Manchester United management. While a 44,000-seater stadium would have been big enough to house the team's 1960s crowds, since then the Man U fan base had exploded exponentially, and by 1990 the recently finished stadium was in desperate need of further expansions. The South Stand currently holds approximately 11,500 fans, whereas the opposing North Stand holds more than double that. The long-term goal is to expand the South Stand to equal or better the capacity of its opposite number. The total projected cost of this expansion comes close to the combined cost of recent redevelopments. Estimates are in the region of £90 to £100 million. However, the dent left in the old hip pocket won't take too long to repair. Judging by recent matchday revenue figures, when the Theatre of Dreams becomes the largest stadium in Britain, boasting a whopping 96,000 all-seater capacity, its matchday figures would jump to a season total of around £115 million per annum. Not bad for a stadium that's been under almost constant reconstruction. Displaying unrivaled staying power, it's not only outlived 2 world wars, the Depression and countless protests, riots and parties, it's also overcome a genuine threat in recent years. In an era where clubs are pushing for higher revenue and ignoring their historical roots in search of larger profits, Old Trafford and Manchester United have held strong. While countless teams around them have been lured to newer venues with better facilities and higher capacities, Man U have resisted the temptation and stayed true, not only to their fans, but also their stadium. It is this loyalty from both club and fans alike that makes Old Trafford such a wonderful stadium. Although the atmosphere or lack of it may have been questioned in recent years, its history is unmatched. Currently the largest club ground in England, the Theatre of Dreams is truly one of the great stadiums of the world. Coming up, we check out the stadium that hosted the 2006 FIFA World Cup final. Germany, home to Volkswagen, over 1,500 types of sausage and some of the most magnificent football stadiums in the world. Allianz Arena, which played host to a number of World Cup games, including the opening match that saw host nation Germany defeat Costa Rica 4-2. Nicknamed Schlauchboot, which translates as blow-up raft, Allianz Arena's changing hue radiates through the night sky to the horizon. Construction began in 2002. The stadium, which was completed in April 2005, looks more like a UFO than a football ground. The Space Age Arena is taken over from the Munich Olympic Stadium as the home ground of both FC Bayern Munich and TSV 1860 München. However, tight rules and regulations governing entry into Allianz Arena have led to it being dubbed by some fans as Arrogance Arena. To Munich's north, Hamburg boasts a stadium that has featured in 2 World Cups. The HSV Nordbank Arena, or the Volksparkstadion, has room for more than 55,000 fans. The stadium has been selected to host the 2010 UEFA Cup final. With a pitch that's heated via undersoil warmers and up to 22 positions for television cameras, Volksparkstadion has been designed to suit the modern-day fan. Although not as technologically empowered as Volksparkstadion, the home stadium of Borussia Dortmund has the largest capacity of any stadium in Germany, swallowing up in excess of 80,000 fans on a regular basis. Also known as Signal Iduna Park, Westfalenstadion began construction in 1971 and was opened 3 years later at a cost of 32.7 million Deutschmarks, or $26 million. Plans to construct the new stadium were drawn up in the 1960s, but it wasn't until Cologne withdrew as host stadium for the 1974 FIFA World Cup that Borussia Dortmund was allocated funds to build their much-needed new stadium. However, architects and planners had to keep an eye on the costs due to a tight budget. The original budget of 60 million Deutschmarks had been cut in half, and plans for an oval stadium featuring athletic facilities were quickly altered to the rectangular stadium we see today. Westfalenstadion's south stand holds over 25,000 standing fans and is one of the most adaptable structures in the world. The standing room can quickly be transformed into a seating area within 2 days. Just like the Volksparkstadion, the Gelsenkirchen Stadium features a few luxuries that other stadiums around the world can only dream of. With a UEFA 5-star rating, the park in Germany's west was purpose-built for the 2006 FIFA World Cup, and supporters of the new ground claim it's the benchmark for football stadiums of the future. Its limited capacity of just under 54,000 for international matches makes it just over half the size of Wembley, but what it lacks in size, it easily makes up for in style. The Teflon-coated fiberglass roof spans the entire stadium and is completely retractable, giving stadium management full control over the weather conditions. Hanging 25 metres over the centre of the pitch are 4 video screens, each with a surface area of 35 square metres. The centrally suspended scoreboard, similar to those found inside ice hockey and basketball arenas, was the first of its kind installed in a football stadium. Since then, other grounds around the world have followed suit. Another impressive extra is the portable pitch, which can be moved in or out of the stadium within 4 hours. Although it's not the first stadium to be able to do this, the combination of the retractable roof, huge video displays and movable pitch makes Gelsenkirchen truly unique. If you're the type of supporter who likes to nibble during the game, then Gelsenkirchen is the place for you. Its smorgasbord of 15 small restaurants, 50 grilling stations and 35 cafes allows it to serve up to 2,500 kilograms of sausages, 7,000 pretzels and 1,000 meters of pizza every day. All catering areas are connected to a 5-kilometer long beer line, capable of serving thirsty punters with around 52,000 litres of beer every match. Gelsenkirchen Stadium is home to the giant German team FC Schalke, who have won the domestic football competition 7 times. Since its completion, the stadium has attracted millions of spectators, with home games by Schalke filling it to capacity. Praised by former FIFA president Sepp Blatter, Gelsenkirchen Stadium is one of the most advanced in Europe and surrounded by a town of nearly 280,000 football-crazed residents. The stadium is one of the world's best. It is, however, Berlin's Olympiastadion that still wears the crown as the most impressive stadium in Germany. The German Cup final is held here every year. It's also played host to hundreds of concerts. It was originally built to host the 1936 Summer Olympics, and, surrounded by the massive Olympischer Platz, it has a history to match the best sporting monuments around the world. Designed by architect Werner March with assistance from his brother Walter, Olympiastadion was built to make an impression. With the Nazis in power, Hitler wanted to make a statement and ordered the construction of a great sports complex in Grunewald named the Reichssportfeld. Construction took place between 1934 and 1936, and once completed, Reichssportfeld was 1.32 square kilometers and consisted of 3 large stadiums, as well as 150 buildings for various sports. The Olympiastadion housed a capacity of 110,000 spectators for the Summer Olympics, where athletes regularly competed in a sold-out stadium. Despite finding itself a bombing target during one of the great final battles in the Second World War, Olympiastadion remained one of the only buildings in the area left standing. In fact, it escaped with barely a scratch. The only signs of injury were a few bullet holes on the outside and a crack in the Olympic bell, which took a 75-metre tumble. After the war, the United Kingdom military occupation used it as its headquarters until 1994. After decades without any improvements, the Berliners decided to renovate the German landmark after it was selected as one of the venues for the 2006 World Cup. Reconstruction for the arena, at a cost of €242 million, began in the summer of 2000. On January the 9th, 2002, construction workers found a reminder of the stadium's charmed life. They unearthed a World War II bomb that had become buried beneath the seating. Surprisingly, the bomb was still active, and it was safely detonated by Berlin police outside the stadium. The new Olympic Stadium has a capacity of 76,000, making it the second largest in Germany behind Dortmund's Westfalenstadion. The roof towers 68 meters over the seats and is made of transparent panels that allow sunlight to stream in during the day. The roof covers a total of 37,000 square meters and covers almost all the seating, ensuring that the fans are in complete comfort at all times. With 20 roof-supporting columns carrying a weight of 3,500 tons of steel, this megastructure was an integral part of the renovations. To create a more intimate atmosphere for football games, the pitch was lowered by 2.65 meters, with approximately 90,000 cubic meters of sand being excavated. The lower tier of the stadium was demolished and rebuilt to create a different angle of inclination. Equipped with the latest technology in artificial illumination and sound equipment, Olympiastadion has leapt into the 21st century. It has 113 VIP stands, a set of restaurants and 2 underground garages. The importance of Olympiastadion as a historical monument was also considered during redevelopment, and much like the new Wembley, it met with its detractors. Some believed that the old stadium should have been torn down completely, while others wanted to see the monument slowly crumble like the Colosseum in Rome. In the end, much care was taken to preserve the natural stone blocks. Although the interior has changed completely, the shell and exterior of the stadium has remained the same. Over 50,000 people watched the Berlin Stadium's opening ceremony. The new VIP and business areas also ensure that this becomes a shining example of how to blend the past with the future. The first test of all the hard work was Olympiastadion's opportunity to host the World Cup final on July the 6th, 2006. Coming up, next we head to Brazil, to a stadium that's broken world attendance records. Welcome to Rio, the home of more than 11 million Brazilians who love to dance, party, and of course, play and watch soccer. Famous for its carnival celebrations, samba music and tropical climate, Rio is the perfect location to watch an enthralling game of soccer. And where else would you go to watch such a game than the famous Estádio de Maracanã? Maracanã Stadium is filled with history, some good, some bad, but there's no doubt that this Brazilian landmark is one of the most impressive sporting venues in the world.
Nenhum estádio no mundo tem a história que esse tem. Esse estádio aqui é
No stadium in the world has more history than this one.
Tem uma história dentro do futebol.
The stadium has a history within world football.
Pra você ter uma ideia.
It's one of the 4 most visited tourist points in Brazil.
Mais visitados do Brasil.
The story of this tourist attraction goes back to the moment when Brazil won the right to host the 1950 FIFA World Cup. The Brazilian government set about building a new stadium for the tournament. Brazilian architects Rafael Gavalho and Pedro Paulo Bernardes Bastos were commissioned to draw up the plans for the new fortress, and on August 2nd, 1948, the first stone was laid and the construction of the world's largest stadium had begun. With the first game scheduled to be played in just under 2 years, work had to be efficient. Thanks to the help of Dr. Ottorino Barassi, the head of the Italian FA and organizer of the 1934 World Cup, the new Brazilian super stadium was on track for completion. However, meeting the deadline was always going to be tough, and on June 16, 1950, building work had to be stopped as the World Cup was just around the corner. The stadium was far from complete. With no press stand or toilet facilities, it looked very much like a building site. Still, it was given the all-clear to host the World Cup. Unlike today's tournament, the World Cup of 1950 was decided by a round robin, where the final 4 teams play off against each other, and whoever finishes on top claims the World Cup trophy. In a match that is historical for many different reasons, Brazil played off against Uruguay in the final match of the World Cup. Already on top of the table, Brazil only needed to draw to claim the trophy. Clearly favourites, the home side, Brazil, were confident and for good reason. In the preceding matches, they'd annihilated Sweden 7-1, then Spain 6-1, while opponents Uruguay had been lucky to draw against Spain 2-2 and only managed a slim 3-2 victory against Sweden. With an official paid attendance of 173,830 and an estimated unofficial attendance of 210,000, the scene was set for a memorable Brazil victory. Brazil took the early lead, to nobody's surprise, scoring a goal in the 47th minute. But that was the last thing that the crowd would cheer about for the rest of the day. Uruguay captain Obdulio Varela, whose inspiring speech in the dressing rooms prior to the start of play included the memorable line, "Boys, outsiders don't play, let the show begin," took the ball back to the centre of the field and shouted, "Now it's time to win." Against all odds, Uruguay scored in the 66th minute, tying the game and dampening the enthusiasm of the Brazilian crowd. The home fans soon rallied after realising that a 1-1 draw would still hand them the trophy, and the deafening roar struck up again. Then, with only 11 minutes left on the clock, Uruguay scored again, leaving the crowd stunned and silencing the 200,000 Brazilian supporters. Not a sound could be heard, even when English referee George Reader signalled the end of the game. Uruguay had won 2-1 in the biggest World Cup upset of all time. Former FIFA president and mastermind of the World Cup, Jules Rimet, would then comment on what happened. The silence was morbid, sometimes too difficult to bear. The once roaring crowd of 200,000 people stood in disbelief as they were stripped of a title they'd already considered rightfully theirs. With no celebrations planned for a Uruguay victory, a very basic ceremony took place where Jules Rimet stood alone on the field to present Varela with the World Cup trophy. 22 gold medals made by the Brazilian Football Confederation had to be destroyed, and a victory song for Brazil, composed several days before the big game, was never performed. Brazilian society was in utter shock after the event. Many newspapers refused to accept the fact that they'd been defeated, and some fans even went as far as to commit suicide. The players of the time were vilified by the fans. Many went silently into retirement, while others were never considered for the national team again. The Brazilian national side decided to change their football uniform as it came to be viewed as a jinx. The white shirt with blue collar was changed to the yellow shirt with a green neckline and blue shorts that the team wears today. Known as Maracanãco, this game will forever be etched in the history books. In March 1954, Maracanã set a new official attendance record in a match between Brazil and Paraguay. Finally, 17 years after construction began, the stadium was finished in 1965. In 1969, Pelé scored the 1,000th goal of his career at the Maracanã against Vasco in front of 125,000 spectators. And in 1989, Zico took his goal tally at the stadium to an incredible 333. Since then, it's hosted a wealth of international and domestic games. Franz Beckenbauer, president of the World Cup Organising Committee, remembers one game in particular.
Yeah, still the same. Still the same. I think, I remember the game in the final of the Confederation Cup, Brazil-Argentina, 4-1 for Brazil. And the way the Brazilian team played was, you cannot play better. So if they play, similar in the World Cup, so I think it's going to be very, very difficult to beat Brazil.
The stadium was converted to an all-seater stadium after an upper stand collapsed, leading to the death of 3 supporters with 50 more injured. This redevelopment greatly reduced the capacity of the stadium, but was essential for supporters' safety. Following its 50th anniversary in 2000, the stadium underwent renovations which would increase its full capacity to around 103,000. Before the work began, devoted Brazilian fans suggested how the improvements should be approached. The Maracanã cannot close for any reason. Maracanã has to be properly taken care of because the Maracanã is like a beautiful woman. It needs affection, it needs to be taken care of and treated well. After years of planning and 9 months of closure between 2005 and 2006, the stadium was reopened in January 2007 with its all-seated capacity pegged back to 95,000. It's now part of a complex that also includes a gymnasium. In 2014, Maracanã will host the World Cup final for a second time, becoming only the second stadium to do so in the history of the competition. Soccer, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Clubs are making record profits, top players are being paid ludicrous salaries, and new stadiums are being built on budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. But despite this, it's not the clubs, the players or the stadiums that have turned soccer into the #1 sport in the world. That power belongs to the fans. It is their passion, their commitment, their enthusiasm for the game that has propelled soccer to the top of the charts. Without them, there'll be no need for fantastic stadiums, and the sport's rich history would certainly be a whole lot poorer. The White Horse Final was only memorable because of the huge turnout it attracted. Although the battle fought on the pitch had its charms, it was the overcrowded stands that made the headlines, and Billy the White Horse was immortalised with a bridge outside Wembley. Sure, the 1950 World Cup final was a huge upset, and Uruguay did extremely well to defy the odds and overcome Brazil. Once again, the memory that lingers belongs to the fans and their eerie silence. Soccer fans are unique. Their passionate commitment to their team, their country and their favourite players finds no parallel in any other sport. Soccer legends are worshipped like gods. Victories are celebrated with abandon, while disappointing defeats are met with despair and recrimination. With emotions running at such a volatile level on such an enormous scale, it's perhaps not surprising that this passion can, at times, turn very ugly. When something unexpected or questionable happens on the pitch, fans can sometimes let their passions run away with them. This is when the dark side of soccer comes to the fore and the dreaded spectre of a soccer riot rears its head. The 1970s saw the dramatic rise of football hooliganism in Britain, and when Manchester United were relegated to the second division in 1974, the club's hooligan contingent, the Red Army, went into revolt. Their violent activities forced the club to erect the country's first perimeter fence, restricting fans from gaining access to the Old Trafford pitch. By the 1980s, soccer in England was in turmoil. Soccer-related violence was at an all-time high. English teams were blacklisted in Europe after 39 fans died and over 400 were injured when Liverpool supporters charged opposing fans, forcing a stadium wall to collapse on top of them. The sight of angry fans hurling Molotov cocktails at police became a regular sight on European newsreels. Although such violence can sometimes be labelled as spontaneous, the majority of the time it is planned by organised groups called firms. A firm is a gang formed by supporters of a particular club. They organise fights with other firms of rival teams, which sometimes take place immediately before or after football matches, often at pre-arranged locations away from stadiums in order to avoid the police. The overhaul of the English Premier League in the early 1990s saw a massive reduction in soccer hooliganism in the country. However, violence surrounding the game is still prevalent in other parts of the world. In South America, riots have become a common occurrence as obsessed fans take their team's losses very badly. Riots often spill out onto the streets, where heavily armed police are forced to shoot the crowd with rubber bullets in an attempt to keep a lid on the carnage. The firms in Argentina, a country plagued by soccer violence, are known as Barras Bravas. The Barras Bravas started innocently enough as organised supporters who simply sang, chanted and cheered during matches. But these days, some Barras Bravas have graduated to hardcore hooliganism and start riots on a regular basis. The majority of these riots, although confronting, usually entail only minor criminal behaviour, with some vandalism and an occasional fight. But in the worst instances, riots that have got way out of hand have left police isolated and fighting for their lives as the hooligans take their frustration out on them. As recently as 2007, authorities were forced to suspend soccer in Italy after a surge in rioting culminated in the death of a policeman. The 38-year-old police officer died shortly after a rioter tossed an explosive into his car outside a Serie A match in Catania. Far from being an isolated incident, it marked the second Italian soccer-connected death in just over a week. Local residents were furious about the rise of senseless violence. Soccer is a game. There should not be any kind of violence. We need to protect the sport and the people who go to see the games. I have kids and I would like to take them to see the games, but it is impossible. You go to see soccer and you may not come home. Sadly, these deaths aren't as rare as one would hope. In every continent that the game is played, there's been at least one death caused by soccer-related violence. In February of 2007, after several incidents of soccer violence, the Mexican Soccer Federation announced the introduction of new guidelines designed to stamp out soccer violence. The measures began by placing a ban on organised supporter groups, known as porras, who are modelled on Argentina's Barras Bravas and the English football firms. The Mexican Soccer Federation and local residents are in no doubt that these porras are the main factor behind the recent surge of violence. They cause problems because they're students. They're used to causing problems. We can't end that, and they go to the stadiums and do the same thing. So they're used to it, and I would tell them it's not right because people go, children go, families go, and they could hurt them. To help with further decisions, the MSF has organised a committee to analyse the emergence of violent behaviour.
Lo que se determinó es precisamente generar un grupo de expertos.
We decided to generate a group of experts to analyse the phenomenon and to be able to build a context in which alternative or additional measures would allow us to reach the objective that soccer must be a family event, a safe event.
Que es que el fútbol debe de ser un espectáculo familiar y un espectáculo seguro.
Over in Turkey, there was no sign of family-friendly fun at a soccer match in the city of Izmir on August the 5th, 2003. One soccer fan was killed and 50 injured when rival supporters clashed before and during a match in western Turkey. The trouble flared at a game ironically billed as the Aegean Friendship Cup between the city's rival second division clubs, Karşıyaka and Göztepe. The Anatolian news agency said a 23-year-old Karşıyaka fan died in hospital after being stabbed. Police detained 5 people and 8 police officers were among the 50 injured. Unfortunately, violence is frequent among passionate Turkish fans, and the police regularly confiscate weapons ranging from lighters to kebab cleavers. In 2000, 2 Leeds United soccer fans were murdered in Istanbul before a UEFA Cup match. The increased police presence at games since then has done little to quell the violence. Turkish fans are also blamed for the eruption of violence at a UEFA Cup final in Copenhagen between Arsenal and Galatasaray that saw 64 rioters arrested. It's so firmly entrenched within the culture of soccer across the globe that it's difficult to imagine that hooliganism will ever totally disappear from the game. The sense of passion, pride and honour that fans invest in their favourite side are the very same emotions that can trigger violence, but that doesn't make it acceptable. With more and more families attending soccer games and thousands of new supporters joining the ranks of soccer fans every day, it's important that clubs and governments work together in their commitment to stamp out this ugly side of a sport that is less like a game than it is a religion.